Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. Very happy to be here today. So today I will be talking about how to mine for relevant vulnerabilities in connected devices. But before we dive into this topic, quick questions. What do all these vendors have in common? That's true, but more particularly, they all rely on this chip here for Wi-Fi access. So a Realtek chip that comes with an SDK for easier interoperability, but which was also shipped with a few vulnerabilities. So with a high vulnerability heap-based buffer overflow, with other additional buffer overflows, vulnerabilities in the web interface, etc. So everyone who relied on this chip, everyone who integrated this chip and this SDK, integrated with it for high-risk and critical risk vulnerabilities. Back in 2021, we discovered these vulnerabilities, responsibly disclosed them to the vendor, to Realtek, and back then we were hoping job well done, got picked up by the press, awareness was raised about it. We were hoping that this would also get fixed by the vendors relying on these Realtek chips. More than a year later, beginning of 2023, we received a news report, research that uncovered that the vulnerabilities that we had discovered back then and responsibly disclosed to the vendors actually amounted to one of the highest exploited vulnerabilities in the second half of 2022. So quite a shocking result. And the reason for this is missing visibility, that people don't know what fundaments they are building upon. And this is one of my favorite XKCD comics that illustrates this situation, in my opinion, very perfectly, that there's like one small piece that nobody is paying attention to, on which most of modern society is building, and this is true for many cases. So not just the instance we found with Realtek, but if you think back to Heartbleed with OpenSSL, the same issue. So a tiny open source component that was very widely used across industries in virtually every product, and all of a sudden prone to critical vulnerabilities that would allow to read arbitrary content of the memory and retrieve sensitive information from that. More recent one, Log4j, we already heard it in the morning. So the same, some small logging utility, all of a sudden crumbling major applications and major systems. But this also happens to more embedded systems. So if we look at Amnesia 33, for example, research published by the colleagues from Forescout, who found critical vulnerabilities in IP stacks, for example, that many connected devices rely upon, also part of various real-time operating systems, also safety critical systems. So also here we have to dig into the supply chain, and this is where SBOM comes in. Software bills of material. This is a methodical approach to collecting all those dependencies, to make sure that each of the components is uniquely identified, that I know what is the supplier, what is the product number, the product name, version numbers, other unique identifiers. And usually this is summarized as, or one of the industry standards there is to summarize this information as a CPE, so as a common platform enumerators. CPE by no means perfect, but to my knowledge, unfortunately, the best we have, but several issues that go with CPE as well, which I will also come back to in a moment. And for SBOMs, we have a few different standards to choose from. So we from NIST, we have the SWID, software identification tagging. I added it for completeness purposes. I don't see it used very frequently anymore. The most frequently used either SPDX, which is backed by the Linux Foundation, initially had a license management as primary use case, and is now also moving more and more towards security features and security use case. And the new kid on the block, so to say, CycloneDX, which was released and is maintained by OVAS a few years ago, just a few weeks ago released a new version of that. One of those two would be the go-to standards to choose from to support if you're a vendor of connected devices. But how do I actually get to the information that I can include into my SBOM, into my software bill of materials? Well, there's multiple sources for that. Of course, I can ask all my downstream suppliers to supply me with their SBOM and then kind of merge this information together. So if everyone was working in an exact way without any errors, this would be the perfect world. Unfortunately, this is not the world we live in today. So we also have to rely on other sources. So we can tap into package managers that are installed on such devices. We can tap into the source code that is used to compile or to create devices. And we can look into the binaries to retrieve information from there. So all these approaches comes with pros and cons. For compiled binaries, since this is the approach that we focus most on, I also want to share some topics that you can look for, or some hints that you can look for in order to identify software components in binaries. So you can look for copyright strings, for example. You can use for symbols, function names that make up certain dependencies, certain components, file names, package managers that give hint. But if you are left alone with assembling the software bill of material, especially if you want to go downstream, not only to your first level supplier, but also to cover the supplier of your supplier and the supplier of this supplier, this gets very tricky very quickly. And so the software bill of material universe comes with many different challenges. One challenge that we see often is that dependencies are not included as dependencies, but that only parts of open source projects, for example, are transferred or copied into new projects. So we don't have an official link to any other dependencies. We just have a few functions or a few modules copied, so vendored into the application. We have statically linked binaries, so which are not like standalone applications on the final systems, but which are merged part of the binary. We have the topic that binaries may be runtime fetched, so that this is particularly common with content distribution networks, for example, within JavaScript, that certain libraries are only fetched while the system is up and running. We have transient software components, so that are used in order to configure the device, but actually don't leave any traces in the final product. But vulnerabilities in a compiler, for example, could also lead to errors or vulnerabilities in the final product, although the software component is not actually part of the final product. Naming conventions. If you look at the CPE for Internet Explorer, for example, you will find at least 50 different versions that all point to the same application, to the same things. And inaccurate versioning or unambiguous ambiguous versioning also contributes to such challenges. But nonetheless, SBOM will be an important topic, so it will be required by the upcoming EU Cyber Resilience Act. It will also be required by other legislation. In the US, it's already required if you want to sell to US government, for example, for medical devices, you have to supply it already. This is something, if you're a vendor of connected devices, you have to get started with and have to get started with fast. But SBOM, why do we actually want to have SBOM? Well, we want to have SBOM for vulnerability management. So we always want to treat it in the context like what is the end goal to it. And looking at vulnerabilities, we know that we need to know, we need to have the transparency about the SBOM, what is inside the device, the connected device, and then we need to match it to our vulnerability sources. So I can look into various databases. I can check supplier bulletins, run automated vulnerability scans, penetration tests, my DAST and SAST tools. So I have many possibilities to actually collect vulnerabilities. And this number is growing, and it's growing very fast. So if we look at the NIST National Vulnerability Database, we can see that the numbers of CVEs skyrocketed from 4,000 or 5,000 vulnerabilities per year a decade ago to more than 25,000 vulnerabilities last year. And this number will likely be exceeded this year as well. So we have a massive amount of vulnerabilities. We have potentially hundreds of dependencies in our connected devices. So we need to somehow merge this information and bring it together. So if we look at the entirety of vulnerabilities, the first thing that we can do, of course, to narrow it down, to make sure that the vulnerabilities actually apply to the versions of the software components that I'm looking at, that I'm dealing with. But then it would also be interesting if the vulnerabilities lie within my threat model. So if they have a certain criticality, if they pose a high risk in the way that I'm using the software component, or if the way I'm using the device. So, for example, if my device is designed not to provide system access to any of my users, I may be not as interested in CVEs and vulnerabilities that require a local attack vector. Or if my devices are designed for physically restricted areas, I may not be interested in an attack vector that involves physical proximity to the device. I can also check for vulnerabilities that actually apply to the product. So even though the version may be the same, even though the product may be the same, I may have deployed it in a different configuration, in a different setup, in a different way where specific vulnerabilities may or may not comply. And finally, I will also be interested, or I will also want to put my focus on vulnerabilities that are actually under active exploitation, where the risk that the vulnerability is exploited is higher than usual. So we can consider the scissors known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, for example, or we can monitor exploit catalogs or exploit databases. And so the most important vulnerabilities that I will want to focus on first and focus my resources on first will reside within this intersection, so that the relevant vulnerabilities that are relevant to my product in my context and are also under threat of being exploited. So let's look at an example. A more or less random vulnerability from 2022 affecting the Linux kernel. So from there we know already that attack vector network. From that perspective, it may be in my threat model. It has high risk. It affects the Linux kernel in a version that I deploy. But if we dig deeper, even though it may be within my threat model, even though it may be under active exploitation, if I look at the description, I may notice that it's affecting a USB driver. So if I dig deeper into the context of my device and knowing that, I have maybe Wi-Fi, I have maybe NFC on my device, but no USB, then I don't need to worry about this vulnerability. I can disregard it. So if we put all of this together, the ingredients to an effective vulnerability management process is to have SBOM in the beginning, is to have the ability or to build the ability to collect vulnerabilities, triage those vulnerabilities, to dissect to the relevant vulnerabilities and mitigate those, apply fixes, updates, and as we all know, security is not a one-time effort, but a continuous process. Doing this over and over again and putting this into a continuous process. And with this, I'm at the conclusion. So, takeaway messages for you is start building a SBOM. Make sure, since you want to spend your resources wisely, make sure to have methods in place to point to the relevant vulnerabilities for you and in your context, and disregard irrelevant vulnerabilities. Do not waste your resources and conduct impact assessment in order to achieve this. you will find me at lunch.